Well, the elites of the media world wrapped up their weekend-long celebration of themselves at the annual White House Correspondents Dinner at the Washington Hilton. The red carpet was lined with politicians, journalists, and a few Hollywood A-listers, greeted by paparazzi and pro-Palestine protesters chanting "Shame on you" outside the same hotel where President Ronald Reagan was once shot. NSL comedian Colin Jost hosted and took the opportunity to make fun of Trump, Biden, and the media.
It's the end of an era. Rupert Murdoch stepped down at Fox News, which is strange. I didn't think there was a step down from Fox News.
Har har. Meanwhile, Biden spent much of his speech taking hits at former President Trump.
There are some who call you the enemy of the people. That's wrong and it's dangerous. You literally risk your lives doing your job. You do. Covering everything from natural disasters to pandemics to wars and so much more. And some of your colleagues have given their lives, and many have suffered grievous injuries. Other reporters have lost their freedom. Journalism is clearly not a crime, not here, not there, not anywhere in the world.
While protesters chanted outside, Biden made no mention of Gaza in his speech. According to conservative pollster Frank Luntz, even pro-Israel Congress members who attended the dinner are growing frustrated by Israel's interference with humanitarian aid in Gaza. Get this, he says, "This might be the most serious tweet I ever sent. Last night at the White House Correspondents Dinner, I spoke privately with 4 members of Congress, 2 Dems and 2 GOPers. All 4 are big foreign policy players, and all 4 are strongly pro-Israel in every way. However, all 4 spoke with significant and serious concern, bordering on anger, about Israel's impact on humanitarian aid in Gaza. None of them called for a ceasefire, but all of them were deeply critical of what they believe is Israel's interference and lack of cooperation in getting aid to the Palestinian people. For more than a decade, some Israeli leaders dismissed what was happening on college campuses. They were wrong then, and they would be wrong now to dismiss this warning about what's happening in Congress."
Last but not least, President Biden applauded the work of all journalists who he says are working to protect the free press and democracy. He named Austin Tice, who was taken hostage in Syria 12 years ago, and of course, the Wall Street Journal's Evan Gershkovich, who has been imprisoned in Russia for more than a year. No mention, however, of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who has been behind bars for more than 12 years and whom his administration is still attempting to bring to justice, according to them. This is what Glenn Greenwald had to say about that. "The only value of this sleazy, gaudy spectacle has been to highlight the real role of U.S. corporate media, part of the royal court, courtiers of it. That's why they can't include Assange on their list of persecuted journalists. It's done by the king, and they can't displease him," which is a point made every year and always a fair one. There's something very gross and self-congratulatory about this display. I think, yes, Julian Assange being snubbed year after year, the very Biden government still following the same policies of Trump's team and Obama's team to prosecute for sharing with the American people the information he got from classified documents. Still attempting to do that. We obviously had a great interview with Julian Assange's brother on Rising last week. Go check that out if you haven't seen it, about where the case stands now. But it's always, and I don't mean to malign the situation at all, the situation of Evan and Austin, other journalists for mainstream organizations that are held prisoner under absolutely horrific circumstances. It is wrong. It should end. It is correct to speak out against it. But there's a selectivity in who gets this "you are a political prisoner" treatment.
Mm-hmm. Look, at least 97 journalists have been killed in Gaza. It's, I think, historically the most dangerous war zone for journalists. Journalists wearing flak jackets that clearly identify themselves as journalists have been killed. It evokes a pattern that started long before October 7th with the killing of American-Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who similarly was wearing a press jacket and helmet when she was killed by a member of the Israeli military. And there has been no accountability for that. And similarly, there are concerns that there will be no accountability for the almost 100 now deaths of journalists that have occurred in Gaza. And that is reflective in many ways of the broader death and carnage that has been inflicted on the people of Gaza over the last 6 months. And that is why there were so many protesters. I mean, just scores and scores of protesters. I have seen protests outside of the White House Correspondents Dinner. Last year, I think there were largely environmental protests. This year, it was orders of magnitude more significant. At one point, some people gained access to a room. I don't know, they rented a room of how planned this was, and dropped an enormous Palestinian flag from the window above the entrance of the hotel. And for all of that to be going on outside, remember, these are now journalists who ostensibly should be agreeing with this substantive criticism of how journalists are being treated in Gaza. The optics of them kind of tiptoeing through the protests that they're supposed to be kind of covering in their finery as they then go inside an event and no mention at all is made of the real world issues that directly implicate journalism right outside. That's, I think, what was so disappointing about it. And then on top of all of that, in some years past, some of the comedic hosts have done more to skewer the actual president.
Yeah, there was very little skewering going on. These were inoffensive remarks, basically in every direction.
It was patronizing, almost insulting. Colin Jost, the viral clip, I admit I did not subject myself to his full remarks.
Nor I.
But the bit that's going around is him just, we were not there.
We did not attend.
But that we're kind of riffing on the idea of how decent Joe Biden was. He says, my grandpa, Colin Jost talking about his own grandpa, voted for decency, and decency is why we're all here tonight. Decency is how we're able to be here tonight. Decency is how we're able to make jokes about each other, and one of us doesn't go to prison after. Well, for one, meritorious or not, it certainly is the case that there are multiple criminal indictments against your political opponent, and you are trying to send him to prison, Donald Trump. I mean, so that's a little bit of an odd joke to make. Second of all, how can you talk about the decency of a president who's being protested as we speak, as they speak at the dinner, for enabling the deaths of over 35,000 people, 13,000 children. I mean, if you want to make the argument that this is what's got to be done, we got to kill these kids because that's in Americans' foreign policy interest, then stand there and make that argument. But don't try to dress it up and pretend that those kinds of actions are decent or the actions of a decent man just because he's interpersonally nice to you and reminds you of your grandpa.
Well, and what is decency? And is interpersonal niceness even
relevant?
A general, or is it a general operating? Is it the way Colin Jost operates in SN? I mean, he's a comedian. Past speakers, and he was pretty inoffensive last night, but in past people they've brought on, remember who was it that mocked the appearance of Trump's former White House press secretary, now like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and was that decent? And I'm not saying it's okay, or it's deemed okay, or some people think it's acceptable to mock public officials, to call Trump, orange, Hitler, Cheeto, whatever person. So what is decency in this context is what I'm wondering from people whose livelihood is made making fun of others. And sometimes it's punching down and it feels wrong, but it's just.
Well, the point of the White House Correspondents Dinner is supposed to be punching up in its best form. It's supposed to be, the idea is supposed to be, we don't have a dictator, right, who will throw you in jail for saying something bad about the we don't live, where is it, you can't show Winnie the Pooh, it's
China,
Xi
Xi Jinping, yeah.
Okay, you can't show Winnie the Pooh because people say he looks like Winnie the Pooh and he's insulted by it, so you're going to ban Winnie the Pooh. The idea is that we don't live in a country like that, so we're going to formalize that by letting the President of the United States of America submit himself to actual ribbing. Actually just getting torn apart in front of the media class by someone who's representing the media class's interest, but who's a funny guy or woman who can do it, right? And instead, it's turned into this, aren't we so proud that we are sitting here, defenders of democracy, all on the same team, fighting against anti-democracy, which is just the other political party, in a way that's completely bastardized the concept that we're supposed to be actually punching up, speaking truth to power, not creating a protective shield around the most powerful man in the country.
Additionally, when they talk about the dangers of the journalists face, of course, journalists in combat zones or reporting abroad, yes, absolutely, that is harrowing work, that is dangerous. That is also pretty distinct from what a lot of people gathered in that room do, where journalism is not even close to one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Dangerous jobs in America are farming equipment, building roofs, doing commercial fishing, doing, being a helicopter pilot, being a ambulance driver. There are dangerous working class jobs in this country, and there's no fancy gala for them. So it's a little bit, I always find it a little, frankly, not in keeping with what the statistics are for which job you're threatened in. Not to say that journalists abroad aren't doing fantastic and dangerous work. They are. So a lot of people in that room are just doing political commentary. I would never say I'm doing a dangerous job. We are not. We're not pretending that 100%. Here.
And most of them, frankly, aren't even taking political positions that make it dangerous for them professionally.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because there are different kinds of dangers. One other point I would note about this is that Colin Jost's wife, Scarlett Johansson, caught some strays in the debate around his performance because people were trying to see some insight into his politics and if that's informing the lightness of his touch. It turns out, I had forgotten about this, Oxfam asked Scarlett Johansson to cut ties with SodaStream, which is an Israeli company and that she was doing ads for, over the fact that they had an illegal factory in the West Bank. The West Bank, legal settlements, you're not supposed to be there, condemned by international law. Even America says that we condemn West Bank expansion. Biden recently even did a little sanction against, I think, a handful of individuals in the West Bank in the context of all of this. Instead of cutting her ties with SodaStream, she stepped down from her role as Oxfam ambassador. So she made her choices. And so people are saying, okay, is this the decency we're talking about? Again and again and again, is this the decency that we're supposed to be focused on instead of the substantive politics here, which is that some people are protesting the murder of tens of thousands of people and want violence to stop and are peace protesters. And some people are saying, hey, you're old, my grandpa was old. You guys are both nice guys who like me.
If you're criticizing Scarlett Johansson, you've gone too far, Briahna. We part ways here. I will not stand for it. More Rising right after this.